Silence can be louder than noise when it's soaked in grief. That kind of silence pressed down on everyone inside the cathedral that morning. Marble floors. Towering ceilings. A room filled with executives in black suits who knew exactly how much power had just changed hands. This wasn't just a funeral. It was a transfer of influence disguised as mourning. My father's coffin rested beneath the altar. He built a logistics empire worth hundreds of millions from nothing but grit and sleepless nights. And now, before the final prayer could even settle into the air, my sister-in-law Samantha stepped forward. She didn't ask. She didn't wait. She took the microphone. With a polished smile that didn't belong in a place like this, she announced that my brother Zachary would be stepping in as CEO effective immediately. Her voice rang with confidence, like this was a product launch instead of a burial. She scanned the room, waiting for applause. Some people shifted uncomfortably. Others nodded, already aligning themselves with the future they thought was inevitable. That's when it happened. A sound rolled through the cathedral speakers. Short, dry, unmistakable. A laugh. It echoed once. Then again. People froze. Heads turned toward the coffin. My brother's face drained of color so fast it looked like he might collapse. It wasn't supernatural. It wasn't a miracle or a ghost. It was a recording. But fear doesn't care about logic. That laugh didn't come from the dead. It came from preparation. To understand why my father laughed at his own funeral, you have to rewind just minutes earlier. While the rest of us stood in quiet reflection, Zachary and Samantha were treating the front pew like a networking lounge. He shook hands with board members, already accepting congratulations. She whispered renovation ideas while pointing at stained glass like she was touring a penthouse. They barely looked at me. When they did, it was with dismissal. Zachary leaned close and adjusted his designer tie. "Don't worry," he murmured. "We'll find something for you. Every company needs someone to handle the boring stuff." Translation. Stay invisible. I didn't react. I didn't argue. Something colder replaced anger, a calm so sharp it felt surgical. I glanced across the aisle at Peter, my father's chief of staff for 4 decades. He stood silently, holding a small remote in his palm. Our eyes met. I gave him a single nod. Peter turned, walked calmly to the back of the cathedral, and locked the doors. The click echoed like a verdict. Then he raised the remote and aimed it at the massive screen behind the altar. The projector flickered to life. My father appeared on screen, alive, focused, and furious. And that laugh. It was only the beginning. As my father's face filled the screen behind the altar, the cathedral seemed to shrink. Executives who had flown in from 3 continents leaned forward without realizing it. My brother stood frozen, caught between disbelief and dread. But my mind didn't stay in that room. It drifted backward, away from polished shoes and public grief, to where this company actually lived. Not in boardrooms. Not in private jets. But in freezing rail yards before sunrise. In distribution centers that smelled like diesel and coffee. In crisis calls at 2:47 a.m. when a single delay could unravel an entire supply chain. While Zachary built his brand at invitation-only events, I was standing ankle-deep in slush outside Detroit, negotiating with union reps to keep shipments moving. While he posted photos from luxury hotels overseas, I was sitting in a server room rebooting a tracking system after a cyber attack. I spent my 25th birthday watching lines of code scroll across a monitor, praying medical supplies would clear customs in time. For 10 years, I was the solution nobody saw. I wasn't loud. I wasn't flashy. In this industry, a woman who speaks up is labeled emotional. A woman who quietly fixes disasters before they make headlines is called useful. So I chose useful. I wore silence like armor and told myself it was strategy. I believed competence would eventually outweigh birth order. I audited fuel contracts. I rerouted shipping lanes. I uncovered inefficiencies no consultant ever noticed and saved the company millions in a single fiscal year. I told myself this was loyalty. That I was honoring my father's legacy by protecting it quietly, without ego. But sitting in that cathedral, watching Samantha grip her pearls, something finally cracked. My silence hadn't been discipline. It had been permission. By not demanding credit, I taught them how to erase me. By fixing problems without acknowledgement, I allowed my work to become invisible infrastructure. Something expected, never thanked. You don't praise a foundation for holding up a building. You only notice it when it fails. They assumed I would always be there. They mistook restraint for weakness. What they didn't realize was that I wasn't staying quiet out of fear. I was observing, recording, keeping score. Every stolen idea, every deal Zachary claimed as his own, every holiday I missed so he could play executive. I wasn't just working. I was building leverage. And as my father's image sharpened on that screen, I knew something the rest of the room didn't yet understand. He had been watching too. He saw the difference between someone who treated the company like a trophy and someone who treated it like a responsibility. My brother thought his inheritance made him untouchable. But the truth was far more dangerous. The person he underestimated most had already paid the price of admission, and she had the receipts. To understand why I felt no hesitation watching my brother unravel in that cathedral, you need to know what happened just 4 hours after our father died. The coroner had barely left the house. The grief was still raw, still disorienting, the kind that makes time feel syrup thick. But Zachary and Samantha didn't head to the funeral home. They didn't call family. They didn't sit with the weight of loss. They went straight to corporate headquarters. I was already there with Peter, sitting in my father's office surrounded by open laptops, ringing phones, and worried messages from global partners. The stock was wobbling. Drivers were calling in, scared about pensions and contracts. We were grieving, yes, but we were also stabilizing the company because that's what leadership actually looks like. Then the elevator doors opened. Zachary walked out like he had just won a war. No black suit. No sign of mourning. Just confidence wrapped in expensive fabric. He didn't ask how we were holding up. Didn't mention Dad. He walked straight to the desk my father had built with his own hands and dragged his fingers along the edge. "This has to go," he said casually. "Too outdated. I'm thinking glass. Chrome. Something visionary." Samantha followed, already scrolling on her phone. Not calling relatives. Calling an interior designer. She looked around and wrinkled her nose. "We should gut this floor. It smells like old men and diesel. We'll need a lounge, a bar. Maybe a rooftop landing pad. Zachary deserves a proper entrance." Peter stood slowly. His face was still hollow with grief, but his voice was steady. He reminded them we had a liquidity issue to manage. That employees were scared. That this wasn't the moment. Zachary laughed. Not nervously. Not awkwardly. He laughed like Peter was a joke. "Relax," he said. "You won't be here much longer anyway. We need fresh blood. Consider this your notice." Then he turned to me. I was holding a stack of urgent shipping manifests, documents that actually mattered. He took them from my hands and dropped them onto the floor. "And you," he said, smirking. "We need a real face for this company. You can stay on to handle admin stuff. Filing. Coffee. You're good at boring, right?" In under an hour, they talked about selling off the trucking fleet to fund a villa overseas. About dismantling 50 years of infrastructure for a permanent vacation disguised as innovation. They thought titles were power. They didn't understand that power comes from the people who choose to follow you. I didn't argue. I picked up the papers. I stacked them neatly. I looked at Peter, and saw something ignite behind his grief. That was the moment the plan was born. They wanted the crown. They had no idea how heavy it really was. The cathedral was so quiet you could hear the projector fan humming as my father leaned back in his chair on the screen. No soft music. No childhood photos. No sentimental farewell. Just him, focused, composed, and unmistakably angry. He crossed his arms and looked straight into the camera, the same look he used right before firing an executive. "Zachary," his recorded voice said, steady and sharp. "You've been waiting for this day longer than you'll ever admit." My brother stiffened. Samantha's confident posture cracked just slightly. "You thought my generosity meant approval," my father continued. "Every time I funded one of your ideas, you assumed I believed in you. You were wrong." The screen shifted. My father's image shrank to the corner as a massive spreadsheet filled the display behind the altar. Rows of numbers scrolled slowly, color-coded in angry reds. "A ledger. Let's review your performance," my father said calmly, like this was a quarterly meeting. Item by item, the failures appeared. A nightclub pitched as a cultural investment, millions gone in months. A luxury automotive venture. Liquidated at a loss. Branding consultants, lifestyle expenses, private travel. All documented. Every indulgence Zachary had disguised as vision was now reduced to numbers and consequences. The congregation didn't move. No coughing. No whispering. Just the brutal sound of truth laid bare. They told me I was spoiling you, my father said. They said I was ruining you by giving you everything you asked for. The spreadsheet paused. They were wrong. My father leaned forward slightly. I wasn't spoiling you. I was testing you. I wanted to see if you could build something when resources were unlimited, or if you would burn it all down. Samantha's face drained of color as realization set in. This wasn't a surprise attack. This was a long-term experiment, and Zachary had failed it spectacularly. I gave you rope, my father said. You tied the knot yourself. The spreadsheet vanished. My father's face filled the screen again, colder now. But here's what you never understood, he continued. I don't give away capital without contracts. A document appeared, clean, official, undeniable. At the bottom was my brother's signature, bold and careless. Those weren't gifts, Zachary, my father said softly. They were loans. Loans against your inheritance. I watched my brother lean forward, panic finally replacing arrogance. His hands trembled as the camera zoomed in on a single clause. When his debt crossed a specific threshold, all future equity and voting rights would be forfeited. And last month, my father said, you crossed it. The cathedral felt like it was holding its breath. Because the final blow hadn't landed yet. The silence after my father's words was absolute. Not the respectful kind. The stunned kind. The kind that follows an impact no one saw coming. Then my father continued. Technically, his voice said from the screen, calm and precise. The company could have sued you the moment your debt exceeded the limit. Assets seized. Accounts frozen. Everything reclaimed. Zachary's breathing became shallow. Samantha's hand slid slowly off his arm. But we didn't, my father said. Because someone intervened. The screen changed again. This time, it wasn't a spreadsheet or a contract. It was a bank transfer receipt. Clean, digital, undeniable. The number was impossible to ignore. Over $6 million. Cleared. Paid in full. The sender's name sat plainly at the top. Mine. A ripple moved through the room like a shockwave. I felt dozens of eyes turn toward me, but I didn't move. I had already lived this moment in my head 1,000 times. Zachary hadn't. You didn't inherit this company, my father said, his voice lowering. You sold it. One mistake at a time. And your sister bought it. Samantha finally stepped back as if the air around Zachary had turned toxic. Her expression wasn't grief. It wasn't anger. It was calculation gone wrong. She didn't just pay off your debt, my father continued. She acquired your equity. Your vote. Your authority. My brother's knees buckled slightly as he grabbed the pew in front of him. His world, built on assumption and entitlement, collapsed in a single sentence. I watched you both, my father said. One of you treated this company like an ATM. The other treated it like a living thing that needed protection. Only one of you understood what ownership actually means. The screen lingered on my father's face for a moment longer. And then, for the first time in the entire video, his expression softened. Jessica, he said. The keys are in the safe. You know what to do. The screen went black. No music. No fade out. Just truth. The lights in the cathedral slowly came back up, illuminating the wreckage my brother had never imagined he could lose. Samantha turned to him, her eyes sharp with betrayal. You told me it was finished, she hissed. You said the money was yours. Zachary didn't respond. He wasn't listening anymore. He was staring at me. And for the first time in his life, he was afraid. Zachary broke first. He stumbled out of the pew and rushed toward me, ignoring the whispers rippling through the cathedral. His confidence was gone. Stripped clean. What stood in front of me now wasn't a leader. It was a man realizing he had no ground beneath his feet. This isn't real, he said, his voice cracking. Dad wasn't thinking straight. He was sick. You can't actually do this. He reached for my hand like muscle memory alone could save him. I stepped back. We're family, he insisted. desperation sharpening each word. You don't fire family. I looked at him closely, really looked at him, and something clicked into place. 4 years, Zachary and Samantha had moved through the world like royalty. They spoke loudly, walked boldly, took up space as if it was owed to them. But now, without the money, without the title, without the illusion of authority, Zachary looked small. Like a child wearing a costume that had finally been taken away. It dawned on me that their power had never been real. It was rented. Everything about them, the confidence, the arrogance, the certainty, had been financed. A lifestyle subscription paid for by my father. And the moment the payment stopped, there was nothing underneath. I reached into my purse and pulled out a thick envelope. I'm not firing family, I said calmly. I'm terminating an employee. I handed it to him. Effective immediately, I continued. Your access to company systems has been revoked. Your keycards are disabled. Your accounts are frozen. Peter had already taken care of it. Quietly. Efficiently. Zachary stared at the envelope like it might explode. And inside, I added, is a repayment schedule for the remaining balance you still owe the estate. First payment is due next month. Don't be late. He opened his mouth but nothing came out. Behind him, the board members checked their watches. Some avoided eye contact. Others nodded slightly. Not in sympathy, but in recognition. Order was being restored. Samantha didn't follow him. She didn't touch him. She didn't even look at him again. The calculation in her eyes had already moved on, and she didn't like the numbers anymore. Zachary stood there alone, a king without a kingdom, while the world kept moving. And that's when I knew. This wasn't revenge. This was correction. Walking out of the cathedral felt nothing like walking in. The air outside was crisp, clean, almost startling. Sunlight hit the stone steps in a way that made everything feel sharper, more real. Behind me, the doors closed on a chapter that had been rotting for years. Inside was chaos, shock, and broken illusions. Outside was clarity. Peter was waiting by the car. For 20 years, he had opened that door for my father. Rain or shine, crisis or calm. That morning, he opened it for me. He didn't say a word, but the slight nod he gave carried more respect than any congratulatory speech ever could. We didn't rush back to the office. There was no urgency fueled by panic anymore. The empire wasn't teetering. It was steady. For the first time, I wasn't holding it together with sheer will and exhaustion. It was aligned. As we drove, we passed the main distribution hub. Trucks rolled in and out with mechanical precision. Drivers checked manifests. Forklifts moved like clockwork. For a decade, I had looked at that place and felt only the crushing weight of responsibility. Every delay, every failure, every risk had lived on my shoulders. That morning it felt different. It felt grounded. This wasn't a burden anymore. It was ownership. I hadn't inherited it. I hadn't married into it. I hadn't been handed a title and told to figure it out later. I had paid for this place with missed holidays, sleepless nights, and solutions no one ever applauded. I had bought stability when others chased appearances. And I had the receipts. My phone buzzed on the seat beside me. A notification flashed across the screen. Samantha had filed for divorce. I didn't feel satisfaction. I didn't feel guilt. I swiped it away like a completed task. Another vibration. Zachary calling. I blocked the number. Not out of anger. Out of efficiency. In logistics, you don't keep broken systems online out of sentiment. You isolate the failure so the rest of the operation can run clean. This was no different. That night, I slept without the familiar knot in my chest. No late-night calls. No fear of what someone else might destroy with entitlement and carelessness. The company was finally in the hands of someone who knew how to carry its weight. Leadership isn't loud. It doesn't announce itself at funerals or demand applause in sacred spaces. Real leadership is quiet, consistent, and earned when no one is watching. It shows up at 3 a.m. It solves problems before they become disasters. It protects what others take for granted. My father knew that. And now so did everyone else.